some of the group by works. So if you download the SQL file, more practice, and if you load it up, you can open this in any editor, or it may open in MySQL Workbench. You can copy and paste this into your SQL terminal. So here, let's connect to my SQL server with username root. Okay, I enter the MySQL password. And here I can copy and paste what was in the SQL file. And you can say, show me all the databases. Show databases. Okay, and then you can see that it created this lead gen business. So let's use that lead gen business. The databases change. I can see tables. Now you can from the ERD diagram that client has many buildings and client has many sites, and a site has many leads, right? Okay, so if I wanted to get all the building history, the SQL query would be select star from building, semicolon. And then I also want to show the client name next to the client's ID. So then I would have to join, right? Building, join clients on, and then I say building.clients ID. Okay, you need to join that with clients.id. And then if I do this, this is the result that you will see. And this has a lot of information. Okay, so let's do a little bit more. So what if we say, okay, I don't want to show me all of the fields, but I just want to show some of the fields, such as maybe the first name of the clients or whatever. Well, you can, instead of the star, you can basically change it up. But let's just keep the star for now, and let me do something to teach you another concept. So okay, hold on. Let me let's go and do that again. But let's go ahead and order by. Why don't we order by clients.id? Okay, so there it is. And it seems like maybe the one that was displayed before was already ordered, but it's okay. Let's order by client's ID. So what if you wanted to, instead of showing individual billing record for each of the client, you just want to show, okay, for Michael Choi or client ID 1, what was the total amount that he paid? Okay, so what you want to do is you basically want to combine records, right? So all of these records basically over here, you want to combine and make it into a single record. Or in other words, you want to aggregate these records and display something. So this is where the group by comes in handy, where you do, okay, let's first do the group. This is the records that I want. And then once you got all the join statements correctly, then you say, okay, I don't want to show every single building record, but I want to, so let's see, it has to be in this order. So instead of showing every single building record, I want to group all of the records that have the same, let's say, clients.id. Okay, so I want to group all of the records that have the same client's ID. And if you do this, let's see what happens. You will see some errors, right? And some older version of MySQL would actually let you run. Seems that the new version will catch something, which I'll explain a little bit from now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, group all of the records that have the same clients.id, but instead of showing me all the fields, just show me the sum of the amount, and then show me the client's ID, and then maybe show me the clients.first name, clients.last name, and clients.email. And if you do that, then it already aggregated, it grouped all of the records that had the same client's ID, and then just instead of showing me all the fields, I pre-selected which fields I wanted to see. And there I can SQL already combined and did all of this. If I want to see, okay, I not only want to see the sum, but I also want to show how many times did each of my client pay me. So then you have to go back and let's see, you say, count the star, the number of records that were combined to produce each of the outputs. So how many groups, how many records were combined here to produce the output for the single record in the in this, right? Does that make sense? So here you can see that there were 5 records. So I count the number of records that were combined, and then it will show that. Now there's another trick. We may be teaching this in the platform, but if not, I'll show you. Is what if I didn't want the field over here to say some amount, and I wanted it to just rename this field as total, and I wanted to rename this field as num transactions. So whatever you want to call. And then there's a, okay, so let's count, okay. Yeah, so whenever you press up and down, it will actually erase everything that you've done. So you will have to go back and there are other shortcuts where you can go to the beginning, but it's okay, let's do it very slowly. So as total, and then count star as num transactions, right? And then press enter, and you will see, this is a little funny that it kind of cut that out, but you actually have to enter the full thing. And now instead of showing some amount as the field name, now you see total and num transaction. And you could have done the same thing. Let's say you didn't want it to have it say the client's first name, client last name. You wanted to rename, let's say instead of first name, you just wanted to call it, instead of first name appearing here, you just wanted to call it first. Then as can be used in any of these fields so that you can do that. There are some other tricks, such as not only can you rename the field, but you can also rename the database table name. So instead of, if you get tired of typing billing and clients and all of this, let's say you can say, you know what, I'm tired of calling billing, so I'm just going to call it T1, join clients. I'm going to call clients table T2, and then I'm just going to join T1.clients ID, T2.clients. Now, when you do the SQL query exercise, I don't want you to do this, T1, T2, but the reason I teach you this is because you may see some of these in the documentations later on, or when you go to Stack Overflow and see other people's SQL queries, you may see some of these renaming. So in the assignments, this would be a little confusing. Don't use it unless you have to, but again, I'm teaching you because later you may see that in the documentations. So anyway, yeah, doing this in MySQL Workbench is of course a lot more visual, but again, just MySQL Workbench is a visual tool to help you run SQL queries. And later when you level up and become a better developer, you're going to be doing more things in the terminal. So it's a good idea to learn how to use both. Later when you deploy things in the cloud, you will have a remote database, and it's always nice to have a graphical user interface like SQL Workbench or other tools to connect remotely to that database and do queries and so forth. So hopefully this video was a little helpful in understanding how group by works. And before you do all the group by, just make sure that you join all the records, that you do all the proper joining. You look at the SQL query, and then you look at the result and say, okay, what are the results that I want to group by? So I can, in this case, I group by the client's ID. You can also group by multiple records, multiple fields. So I could have said, do you know what? I want to know how much each of my client paid me each year. Then I can do group by client's ID, comma, and I can also do by the year of the charge date time. And that could be done too. So for example, I can do that. Let's see if that query runs. And then instead of just by the group ID, I can, for example, do year. What was the field that I wanted to group by? It was called charge date time, right? So let's, if I remember right, that's what it is. And I need to have a semicolon. And then what I would also need is, instead of just displaying the sum, the total, the num transaction, I should also display the year charge date time, because just looking at the record above, can you see how how much was paid for each year. It doesn't display that as a field, right? So if I want to go up and say, okay, also display the year of charge date time, then building. Okay, let's do that again. Building, okay, semicolon. Okay, now you can see, okay, this client, ID 1, paid $82.50 for year 2011, $1,200 for 2012, and so forth. So always when you do group by, just do the join statements without the group by. Look at the records and say, what are the records I want to group by? And then add the group by. Once you add the group by, then go back to the, instead of the star, then say, okay, out of all the, what are the fields that make sense for me to retrieve? And if you follow that pattern, then doing group by, it will be really fun, and you will be amazed what you can do with SQL queries. So good luck and enjoy.